Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I am your host, Mookie Spitz, and it's my pleasure to have on the factory floor today, Helen Hynson Vettori. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. As I understand it, you were an EMT, a medical intelligence analyst with the Department of Homeland Security. So you've been in the trenches. You have lived experiences helping people out in emergency situations. You also have a high-level overview of medical intelligence, strategy, and you are also the author of the Black Swan speculative fiction thriller series that explores what can really go wrong in a pandemic-like scenario. So how did you get from EMT to medical intelligence analyst and now into the world of speculative fiction?
Well, thank you. I really didn't expect to be an author of a series, much less one book, but it just happened, and I'll tell you how that progressed. Like you said, I started out as an EMT, went on to become a paramedic, was involved in lots and lots of calls, most of them small, of course, but some quite significant. Then when my husband and I started to have a family, we said, well, I'll stay home, and he would continue in the fire and rescue service, and that's how we met. But when 9/11 happened, I really felt the call to go back into service. And I announced that at the dinner table, I don't know, maybe about the middle of the month. And our daughter broke into tears and said, I can't have two parents in such a dangerous job. So I took that to heart, and I thought, well, there is another avenue to explore. And I called up my former paramedic partner, who was the director of the unit of the protective medicine branch, which fell under in the umbrella of Department of Homeland Security. And because of my background with him, and also because I learned and earned my master's in strategic intelligence, it kind of made sense for me to move into a job to end up as the senior medical intelligence analyst. And it was great until reorganization. You know how governments are. So I ended up in what was called the National Emergency Management Division. First, it was the National Incident Response Unit, and, went through a number of changes. But ultimately, I was there, and I was focusing on planning and preparing for biological threats to include pandemics. Now, I walked out of the door when I retired in 2018, and I thought, well, I've done my part, and now it's time for me to travel and to paint and to read books and just do whatever I wanted to do. And just like everybody else, when 2020 hit, I was taken aback. I wasn't surprised, but I was taken aback because this is my life. How dare something interrupt what I had planned? And at first, I was very much in agreement with what was going on because we didn't know what was coming down the pike. And so I fully agreed with the lockdown. But as the days went on, I became perplexed. And then I became dumbfounded. And then I became almost outraged because I couldn't unknow what I knew. I couldn't forget what planning and preparing had taken place across the entire federal government since 2005, when President George W. Bush tasked us to plan and prepare for such an event. And so I I would rant and rave to my siblings on the Zoom calls, how everybody got together because that's the way they could. And one day my sister said to me, "There's a story there." Well, I hadn't thought about that. I knew that journaling was cathartic, and it really was a cathartic thing for me to do, to sit down and put down what I could speculate. And I made this story occur in the future so that there could be a degree of separation, so that the trauma of the moment and now the trauma that is post-traumatic stress syndrome won't affect the reader. The reader is able to see what I imagined could happen in circumstances politically driven, as negative aspects continue to compound the situation. So as I sent chapters to my brother and sister, they were just amazed at how I dreamt up, so they thought, these situations that were occurring in real time, days, weeks, even months later. My brother asked me, "How in the world did I know such things would happen?" Well, it was my job. And people are pretty predictable, except they're always the X factor. And you will find the X factor in so many ways in disasters and everyday life. For instance, wearing a mask. Who thought that would be controversial? It's something that we as planners never considered. You either wear them or you don't. You need them or you don't. And so that was something that I had to scratch my head over. But it just shows how people can change things on a dime. And as I believe it was Eisenhower who said, plans are everything, planning is everything, planning is nothing. And what that means is if you have things in place, you can turn on a dime to react to whatever's coming down the pike. But if you don't have things ready and available, then you're scrambling right from the get-go. And unfortunately, it appeared that that was what was going on in 2020. I heard on a newscast that I'll call it the playbook, the operations plan that had been written and vetted over years and years and years was literally discarded. And when you're building an airplane as it's flying, you ain't going to be too successful. So that's was something that I had to purge, the anxiety, the frustration. And you see that in my first book, and I'll say why it's my first book in a minute. It's Black Swan Impact. And that was my cathartic moment, is to be able to express my anxieties and forecast what could happen should this cascading set of miscues or unfortunate paths continued. Now, when I finished writing that, I realized that the characters had so much more to say.
Well, let's put a pin in it just for a second, because it's an awful lot for our listeners and viewers. One
Okay.
great aspect of science fiction and fantasy is to do exactly what you said, which is you remove yourself a little bit from the immediacy and emotion of the moment. You're able to think about things with a fresh perspective. And then when you mirror it and present it back to the reader, then they're really able to see things they might not have seen before. It's the counterfactual, conditional what if. And that's a really useful way that the genre helps people better understand things and really come to grips, especially with a crisis kind of situation. And it sounds like you really took advantage of that opportunity with the genre of science fiction or speculative fiction to indulge that. And it's interesting to me that you've shifted organically from, again, an EMT to medical intelligence. You retired, and then the pandemic hit you and everyone else in the face. And it was like the perfect storm of all your lived experience and expertise and your emotional frustration, with what was going on, that became this book.
Exactly.
Is that about
And
right in terms of how we frame this up?
you hit it right, exactly right. Now, many people wouldn't know the term Black Swan event. So maybe now is a good time to define that. So, Black Swan was originally coined by a professor of economics. So the term has been used for quite some time in that area of a professional arena, but it's trickled down and into the emergency field. It is a catastrophic disaster that couldn't be foreseen or imagined because of its unprecedented impact. So let's take, for example, an automobile accident, or let's even get a little bit less dramatic. Your car breaks down on the highway. That's pretty catastrophic to you, particularly if you have to be somewhere immediately. But, it's your problem. You can get it taken care of pretty easily. Now let's go to the next step. You break down. It's icy, foggy road conditions, and there's a chain reaction. That's a significant incident for multiple people, but still very localized. Now let's jump ahead to you're in your car, you break down, and suddenly there's an earthquake, and you're on an unstable area, and all the vehicles around you and in the entire region are struck hard. And that is, the catastrophe for an entire region. So they can be small, they can grow large, and that's how incidents are handled. They start small and then grow from there.
So you look at this from the point of view of a spark. People talk about the butterfly in Bermuda that flaps its wings, and then chaos theory. All of a sudden, there's a hurricane in the Atlantic. So catastrophes start with a trigger, and then there's a cascading effect of implications. And a black swan event is where there could be a trigger. It might even seem at first blush as inconsequential or of low significance or danger, and then it erupts exponentially into a potentially existential threat.
Exactly right. And with COVID, maybe that trigger that should have alerted people earlier might not have been recognized as well as one would hope. That, China was reeling there for a good bit before people started to notice. So that in the terms of the globe was localized. We didn't realize that it would become worldwide in a relatively short order.
Yeah, the capacity of human beings to just live in a world of rationalization and denial is incredible, especially when it's just so potentially disruptive. You have your coffee in the morning, you go to work. There could be a crisis, a family member dies, you have an accident. But this idea of a systemic potential breakdown that impacts every aspect of our existence is so left field. It always happens to someone else. And we read history books
Exactly.
of cataclysms. There's no way that my life can be disruptive. And I remember the entire country of Italy was in lockdown. And I am living in Manhattan, the most population dense city, not only in the States, but in most of the world. And nobody cared. I was already buying a second fridge and stocking up on toilet paper, and I posted it on social media. And with the country of Italy locked down, I was a crazy survivalist, according to friends and family and even colleagues. And I worked in healthcare communications. And I would be at
Okay.
meetings with senior people, PharmDs, medical strategists. And I would listen to them and say, "Oh no, this is going to blow over. This is no big deal." And that was only weeks from total shutdown of the entire city.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you have seen kind of the other side as well.
Yes.
And yes, people are the X factor that you never can truly analyze ahead of time. You can speculate with assumptions, but you know, that X factor, Murphy's Law too, right? So, yeah. And then a side note, my husband teased me no end. I had stockpiled N95 respirator masks for years. And when we retired, we were moving, and my husband said, "Well, now we can get rid of these silly masks." And I said, "Oh, no, 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 no. We're going to keep those." And boy, he sang another song when 2020 came around, and we really did have the opportunity to use those and to share with people.
So it sounds like your book is incredibly topical, and in a speculative fiction kind of way. It takes what we all went through, channels it as a kind of catharsis for society, and then you take it to the next level. Can you give our listeners and viewers a little bit of a teaser about the Black Swan series? You don't have to give away any spoilers, but give us a lowdown. We know how it came to be. What's the setup like? What's the style like? And what were you going for when you wrote it?
Well, actually, I don't take credit for writing it. I think the book wrote itself. So I was just the conduit who channeled what was out there in the ether, so to speak. I really feel that this is a cautionary tale of how people can either change a trajectory in a good way or maybe in a not so good way, maybe even in a very detrimental way. And so, kind of like a fairy tale, here's an example of something, and this is what you should or shouldn't do. And so, maybe if I can just scoot ahead for a minute to my second book, where I felt like the characters had more to say. In the second book, Black Swan Shock, I even include in the book club section a question of how people can assess how ready they are, or maybe how ready they're not for an emergency, and then how to get better prepared or even really super prepared.
And what is the, again, without the need for too many spoilers, what is the source? Are we dealing with another pandemic style disaster? Is it a bio weapon? Is it a virus? Is it an alien invasion? What is the crisis without revealing too much?
Well, if you see by the picture on the front cover, it looks like some kind of cracking explosion, perhaps. Let me just give you a little bit of the background of how I came up with this, because I knew right away I wanted to continue, but I was perplexed how to do that. And of course, all of us took long walks during COVID lockdown, and I was on my sojourn just like everybody else in the neighborhood. And a girl down the street named Millie was just so pleased to see me. She waved and smiled, and I thought, well, she's just brightened my day. I've got to make a character like Millie, who, by the way, has Down syndrome. And so the character that I developed had to be an adult Millie, but the name is Marla in the book. At any rate, what is the Black Swan? Well, the Black Swan is an earthquake, a 9.2 magnitude earthquake in St. Louis. And I bet you're wondering why I chose St. Louis. Well,
Not usually on the known fault lines.
exactly. Not many people know of the fault that's called the New Madrid fault. And because I was an emergency manager for the Department of Homeland Security, we would plan and prepare for all kinds of hazards, including earthquakes. And the one that we thought would be the real black swan for our country is one that would be actually there versus in California. And the example of such a horrific earthquake is one in our history. In the early 1800s, there was a very large earthquake that was so great, the bells in the steeples of Boston rang. So you can imagine it was quite enormous. And so what I did is, as I walked, I kind of thought of that, and I came right home and I started researching firsthand accounts of people who lived through that earthquake. And it was so compelling, I chose that as the next black swan.
That's very intriguing. I could personally say, living in Chicago, we had a little quake. New York, I lived for 13 years, and there was a jitter here and there. So this idea, again, this conception that the San Andreas fault is the only relevant fault is just categorically incorrect. And the planet has had a history of cataclysmic earthquakes. The one in China, going back to the 16th century, I believe, killed more people than any other natural disaster in human history that we know about. As many as 850,000 people were killed in about an hour at that time. So you're not too far off, I think, in terms of positing a black swan event, which is surprising and yet very credible, and unfortunately is inevitable given the dynamics of plate tectonics, how vulnerable we are. So I think that's an intriguing premise. And 9.2, by the way, is ginormous. It's a logarithmic scale. It's
Exactly.
exponential. So the difference between a 7 and an 8 and an 8 and a 9 is literally earth shattering.
Exactly. And then in my looking up things and learning more and more, I didn't know it, but did you know even the moon has earthquakes? I was
That was
amazed.
measured by when we landed. We had before we did manned landings, we landed little guys to see if the soil could even hold a lander. And there were seismographs in there, and we measured moonquakes, which
Isn't that
is
something?
weird because the moon doesn't really have plate tectonics. It's a big bundle of dust, really, low density, but even the moon quakes every once in a while.
Yes, our universe is amazing. Absolutely.
And a dangerous place. We take everything for granted. And the black swan events, by definition, are rare and unexpected, but they're way more frequent than we would care to fathom.
And it seems to me that things of great hazard are coming more quickly. So, for example, a pandemic, by definition, was believed to be cyclical about every 30 to 40 years. Now, that's an average, but did you remember we had a pandemic in 2009? And then all of a sudden, 2020, that's what kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't thinking that there would be one for a while yet. So there's that. And then I still keep tabs on things that emerge, viruses, bacteria, fungi, etc. And it's amazing to me still how these things that are emerging can all of a sudden be that match in the Tinder. And
Yeah. And we might even be helping to accelerate that because of the
exactly.
speculation around the lab leak, which
Yes.
has gained progressive credibility after even the idea was censored off of social media, which was a highly politically charged nugget in a highly politically charged environment that really went nuts during the pandemic. It seemed all evidence-based reasonableness flew out the window, and there was a lot of swirling misinformation. Matt Ridley has an excellent book on the origin of the COVID virus,
I read it.
pro and con lab leak. But
Uh-huh.
to your point, there's been pandemics throughout history, but we're really at the cusp right now, given our technology, where we could actually create them. And it behooves us to exhibit a modicum of self-control as a species in terms of the risk that we take with growth of function, research, and all the naughtiness that we're doing in the name of science.
And that leads to what I am currently in the editing phase, the third book. It's Black Swan Terror. And it's a human caused event using a biological threatening agent.
So I'm leading the witness here. Great minds think alike. And what it sounds like to me is your Black Swan series zeroes in on a calamity. You have the 9.2 in St. Louis area. Then you have this man-made bioweapon that's released. So you're showcasing these different Black Swan events. Are there characters that are combined? Is it the same universe that all these series of cataclysms take place within?
Yes. So the first book starts in 2113, and the third book is 2142, with many of the same characters having moved through to that time.
That's great. That's very intriguing. Very, very, very intriguing. And how have you published? So what is your angle of attack? You wrote the book, and what were your next steps to getting it out there?
Well, I needed an agent, a literary agent, and that was much harder than writing a book, and discouraging. But one day when I was close to just giving up, I did receive a call, actually, not an email, but a call. And this gal,
Old school.
yes, well, I won't divulge how old she is, but
Oh,
she and I
I didn't
shared
mean
the
it in
same.
terms of chronological age, but
Oh,
people don't call each other anymore.
well,
So
she and
the
I
idea that
same.
your phone would ring and you pick it up and there's a business opportunity is almost unheard of, right?
Yeah, well, she and I are same age group, so
Okay.
it kind of clicked that way.
Okay.
Um, but unfortunately, she found COVID to be so overwhelmingly hard in the industry that she felt she couldn't navigate through it, and she said she was sorry. She just had to retire, and certainly I understood. But
I understand that too. There's been an allergy. Notice that there are hardly any books, miniseries, rom-coms that focus on that era. It's as if it never happened. And there was the exact same trend after 1918, the global pandemic. And then it led into the roaring 20s, right? Where it was like, oh, we survived that. So woohoo! And people didn't even want to talk about it. They didn't want to read about it. They didn't want to reminisce about it. They just wanted to live their lives in ways where they were thankful they even made it. And I think there's a bit of that momentum in our culture right now too. Oh, that was the pandemic. That was crazy time, and now we're living.
I agree. And my grandmother actually was one of the victims who survived the 1919 influenza. She said that it was the worst illness she ever had. And
How old was she when she contracted it? Because
let me
that was
think.
pivotal. The influenza was the opposite of COVID. It right in terms of demographics. it saved children and the elderly. And the maximum impact, if I remember, in terms of the epidemiology, was people in their 20s, in their 30s were wiped out.
Yes. And that's because they have a robust system that can combat the illness with great force, whereas youngsters haven't developed their immunity well, and old people have lost a great deal of their immune system. And so the 1918-1919 influenza just devastated that population. And she was 19 at the time.
Okay, she was right at the cusp of
Mm-hmm.
survivability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that she would endure a horrible experience and yet actually live to tell the tale.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what reading about it was horrific. People would cough themselves into breaking their ribs, and it
Absolutely.
killed you very fast. If you contracted initial symptoms at lunchtime, sometimes you were dead by dinner.
Exactly.
Just shocking. It makes COVID look almost mild in comparison, but pretty bad stuff.
So my grandmother did talk to me about things related to that, and I tried to weave that into what's the virus in Black Swan impact, the kind of devastating hit you and blindsides you in moments, seemingly. A very quick death seems to be the case, and
Right.
overwhelming. But through time, you discover that maybe that's not such the case. But as things are progressing, and in the beginning, it appears that it's something that has almost maybe 100% mortality rate, that they're just seeing
Which
this.
is scary. I mean, COVID was what? Like, it was 0.5, 0.2. It was very
I
low.
thought it was 0.3, but
0.3. Yeah, I think you are right. Yeah, and even a little decile difference makes a huge difference for a disease. But when you're getting up into the teens and the 20s, that's a society decimator at that point, let alone in the 80s and 90s. But we were talking about your getting your agent. So you're on your phone with this agent or potential agent. She's like, I'm interested, seems to be great, but people are allergic to this COVID stuff.
Right.
So what happened from that point on?
Well, so I did jump to someone else who was fairly helpful, but things didn't work out. So I was kind of stuck. And the publishing house, Austin Macaulay, reached out to me, perhaps because the original gal, Jerry Sturman, had put out feelers some way, shape, or form. I'm not exactly sure, but they offered me a contract and I took it.
Great. So so you were peddling your content. Did you write a treatment? Was that going around the campfire, or the entire book? You were just passing it around, and this potential agent passed it around, and so on and so on, and it got to the publisher, who basically said, "Oh, this is hot stuff. I think we want to do this," and voila, you were officially published. Is that more or less the trajectory?
Yep.
Okay, because I've had guests on who are the full spectrum. Traditional publishing, which is what you've done, and then there's the indie author, and I'm the indie author, where I just throw the PDF on Kindle Direct Publishing, and then I get the book on my desk a week later. But what I don't get is the legitimization, if you will, and the distribution of a publisher. I'm published, I have an ISBN number, but it's all on me to market and to disseminate. And you went the traditional route, and I had a guest just the other week, Matthew Kressel, and he's a science fiction writer, and he's taken both approaches depending on his book. Sometimes he just self-publishes and goes for it, and other times he's got different publishers that he works with. So I think the playing field is very interesting for publishing now.
I would call what my contract involves is a hybrid because, yes, Austin Macaulay does a share of things. I do a share of things,
And I see
particularly.
that. There
Yeah.
you are with your, you're applying for awards and you're showing up and you're doing the media tour of your book, which is exciting. You having fun doing this?
Oh, it is fun. And
Yeah.
being retired, I feel like I have the time to devote to it, and it's fun. It keeps me busy. It keeps
That
me
is
engaged.
awesome. Right. That is cool. So you've got published and it's out there, and you've again applied for awards and you've appeared and won. What is the message that you want to convey? Because the feeling I get is that this book has emerged organically from your lived experience, from your intelligence and know-how and an overarching view of society and science, and also all of us enduring the pandemic. If when people read your book, what sentiment or what kind of call to action do you hope to instill in them after they read about the 9.2 in St. Louis and the man-made contagion? It's a thriller. So it's number one, it's got to be entertaining. But I get the feeling that you're doing a cautionary tale here, just like you mentioned.
Exactly. And in the second book, and I will also include it in the third book, is a way, like I said, for the audience to evaluate their ability to be prepared and to understand things that people don't really get because, one, they don't think they need to, because everybody thinks, oh, the cavalry will arrive in,
Yes.
a minute, 5 minutes, 20 minutes. No, especially when it's a black swan, you're talking many hours, if not many days. And
And
so,
potentially weeks,
mhm,
depending on the severity of the event. If the system is overloaded, if the grid goes down, if you're one among not tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, but millions of people who are stricken, then good luck getting the help you'll need for an extended length of time. We grew up back in the day. I'm a boomer Gen X kind of cusper. So back in the days in the 70s in particular, there was this big survivalist movement. You had people building bomb shelters and stocking up.
yeah,
My uncle in Skokie, Illinois, bought a house that literally has a bomb shelter underneath the front lawn. There's a little oxygen vent, a pole sticking up out of his front lawn of his little brick house. And we would go down there as high school students, and like party and hang out in the steel lined bomb shelter underneath his lawn. So it used to be a thing when the Cold War was almost hot, when the threat of nuclear war was hanging on. When we used to do drills as elementary school kids for diving under our desk in
yes,
case Chicago got nuked. This
yes,
was a real thing.
it
Now,
was.
after the wall came down and there was this sense that tension was removed, there's been this general contempt for this mentality that we need to prepare for a black swan event. And I think COVID was the wake up call,
I
a
hope so.
cross generational wake up call for all of society that at its very foundation, all of our support could vaporize in a second.
I You have said it exactly right. If each individual takes responsibility for him or herself, his or her family, including pets, then that makes everything a whole lot better, and reconstitution and returning to normal can be quickened or even uh, more immediate than one could even imagine had those people not done their part. Remember the scenario of the car, the single car growing and growing in magnitude. Well, if that person had a car that was well maintained, it might not ever have broken down. So, it's something that we can do very easily. Now, yes, I bought N95 respirator masks and put them in our basement by the case, I must say. But there are simple things that you can do. And it was interesting. I was invited to a book club in New York, and the people gravitated toward this. So the book club questioning and answering the discussion really kind of focused on how the people there, could plan and prepare better. And I heard from the leader of the group just a couple of weeks ago that one of the people in the book club asked for presents for Christmas to have things such as a straw that can filter water, and batteries that can be charged ahead of
For
time.
Christmas presents, you get
Yes.
survivalist swag and gear tucked underneath your Christmas tree. I think that's kind of maudlin and a little tragic, but also endearing at the same time, right?
Right.
That's really fun. Speaking of which, let's do two things, and I think this will be fun. Let's go from the bottom up and the top down. From the bottom up, give us your list of drop dead gotta haves in our age of the potential Black Swan. And then we'll flip it around to talk about the big cataclysmic things that could happen. But I think our listeners and viewers would be intrigued to hear your expert opinion in their homes, in their apartments. What do you really, really need and this is not hysterics.
No.
This is not paranoia. It's just given the realities of what you're describing, when the probabilities start mounting more and more time, what do we need to succeed, or at least survive, in this age of Black Swans?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to think in terms of a minimum of being able to support your own existence and your family and pets for 72 hours. I would suggest more than that, but the minimum of 72 hours. Have water on hand. And if you don't, and if you can plan ahead, let's say a whole line of tornadoes is coming your way, that they are predicting that it's going to be a terrible tornado evening. Clean your bathtub and then just fill the bathtub up with water. There's a water source for you right there.
Some of the prevention and kind of prophylaxis here is actually paying attention and being responsive to the Black Swan that might actually be headed your way. So that's one thing. So number one, at least 72 hours have bottled. Assume the grid goes down. Assume the plumbing doesn't work, and assume everything has become dysfunctional. Then water, you need food backup. Assume
Yes.
your fridge is no longer getting cold. Assume you can't use any appliances, and for at least 2-3 days, ideally more, set yourself up for minimal viability. That's number one. And number two, to your point, you're hearing about the tornado, there's some rumblings, then be proactive. Like, the probability for this event has just risen significantly. Don't assume the best, assume the worst, and then you'll be covered for sure.
Absolutely. Or at least much better off.
Yes. Yeah.
So in addition to that, people don't think about medications. If you need medicine and if you don't have it on hand and can't get it for days or even weeks, then that's a problem. So always keep medicine on hand. And what we did when I was in DHS, we would have to respond in emergencies. So we had a go bag, but that doesn't mean that the general person can't have a go bag. And in that, I would keep medications And every, say, 6 months, I would take out the vials that I had put in there, replacing with fresh vials. Same thing with perishable foods, non-perishable, sorry. They do go bad after a while. And so you want to swap those out. And so what are you talking about food? Well, if you don't have a pantry, just get things that can be easily carried, that are light and take up as little room as possible. And I know they're not great to eat normally, but something like jerky, a package of jerky would be a good option. It's stable for a good bit of time and it's protein. And then on the other hand, sugary items. Yeah, we shouldn't eat things like,
Yeah,
well,
but
say,
you're gonna need your A1C level boosted in times of crisis, and
right.
you're gonna need energy.
Yep.
So either protein bars, anything that's portable, convenient, storable is worthy to have. Other people also talk about iodine tablets in case of a nuclear issue. Other
Yeah.
people talk about being armed, and I know that that's a contentious issue, especially in our environment. But many people think of the Walking Dead scenario where
Of
society
course.
breaks down. So these are factors, and I assume it depends on your level of risk, your attitude toward what to do in a situation like that. But options abound, and at the very least, be prepared,
And don't
anticipate
forget
the
about your
worst.
animals.
Yes, your pets. You've brought
Yeah.
pets up many times. Do you have pets?
Not right this moment, but we have always had animals. We're just kind of an in between right now.
Okay, so pets are like members of the family, and people forget that they have their own needs. So when the
Hmm.
grid goes down, it can be rough for them too. And then if you're angst ridden and emotionally wrecked because your pet can't get what they want, then that de facto is going to make you upset too, making a bad situation even worse, right?
And let's also look at it from the overarching factor, the high end look. Pets running amok in a disaster can be very dangerous for first responders. So yeah. So, in Katrina, there were so many animals, particularly dogs, that I understand. It's you or the dog, of course.
Yeah,
It's
I remember those. It made headline level that the EMTs were shooting dogs. And again, put it in their shoes where, they're running around and you need to get done what you need to get done. So it's problematic, right? Yeah.
yeah. And you
Yeah.
can't blame the animals because they're scared. They don't know
No,
what's
they're
going
freaked
on.
out. That we at least have the benefit of more or less knowing what's going on, and knowing what's going on gives us the added benefit of seeing a way out. A
Hmm.
freaked out animal just knows that the world is turned upside down, and that's not great.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
And
about from oh, I'm sorry. Please go
the
ahead.
last thing I want to
Yeah.
mention is cash will be king. There won't be any
Ah,
ATMs.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There won't be banks open.
Right.
And if you keep a stash in your drawer, the minimum I would suggest is 30. Now, I have to admit, I raid our stash far too often and let it get below an acceptable level far too often. But cash will be king. And don't get 20s, don't get 50s, get fives and tens, or even ones and fives, whatever, because you don't want to be in the situation, I want to buy a hamburger. Okay, give me $50. That's all you have? I'll take the $50, right?
And then conversely, have more, not less. I mean, $50 ain't going to last you a long time, even if they're in fives and singles. And you're probably better off with several $100s, even several $1,000s in cash, depending on how long this catastrophe could last. So have your own little stash.
Right.
They're cashola, not Bitcoin. It's not going to help. You can't access that. Not your bank account. You won't be able to pull the money when the grid goes down. The grid goes down, and U.S. greenbacks will probably be good for a while. And even if you could have any kind of gold or silver, I mean, that couldn't
Sure.
hurt either, right?
Bartering.
Bartering, yeah,
Mhm.
anything of real value would be in your best interest. I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about to have cash on hand and as much as you could spare as your own little emergency stash
What you can comfortably put to the side
and
and,
afford,
and
right?
feel like this is something that could last me for 72 hours minimum.
Minimum in case it gets rough. So
Mm-hmm.
let's turn it around. So we have our survival kit. We know what we need. And in your Black Swan series, you describe cataclysmic earthquake. You describe a bio event. What other big things can go wrong that many people don't realize can go wrong? Now, as science fiction tropes, and even as a science geek, there's a bunch of things that I know can go wrong. So, for example, like volcanoes and super volcanoes, those haven't erupted in a while. But there was one point in all of our ancestry when there were only about 1,200 humans left. We almost went extinct. They can trace it through the lineage and the DNA analysis, where there was this huge bottleneck, and it was caused by an epic super volcano event,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost made us extinct. So these can happen. Yosemite can blow
It could.
next week, and
Mm-hmm.
that is a super volcano event, which could be
Mm-hmm.
catastrophic. There's other ones like an asteroid or a comet. They're
Yes.
hitting the Earth all the time, and some bigger than others. But look at the dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major one. 65 million years ago. They're rare, but they happen. What other things should we be on the lookout for?
Sure. So when I was at DHS, and I have to assume it's still the same, there are 15 hazards that are planned and prepared for.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you've mentioned several. Cyber, that's a big one. That's something that would really paralyze us if it's probably a bad actor going in there and taking down, the grid somewhere or everywhere in a country,
Yeah.
or uh, denying the supply chain in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's not something that I care to ever experience. Then, of course, you have your tornadoes, your hurricanes, um, weather in general. Let's just say. I don't know if you have recovered from the snow that happened last weekend.
I'm actually in Orange County, California. So
Oh,
not to rub it in, it's been 75 and sunny while you guys are brutalized. However, speaking of earthquakes, brush fires,
yes, exactly.
landslides and mudslides, and
Yes,
riots. So
yes.
we've got all of that here. So sooner or later, you just keep spinning the roulette wheel, and we'll catch up to you. But this week has been bad for you, not that bad for us. But
Well,
it's cold. It's cold by you, right?
oh yeah, very cold, but
Yeah,
I don't mind the cold with snow. So we have the snow, so I'll accept the cold.
yeah, yeah. So,
But let's just say, okay, how does somebody put their mind toward 15 different scenarios? Please don't. My suggestion to you is just to make all around planning and preparing, and remember the statement that plans are nothing, planning is everything.
or
So
the best laid plans are only as good as what's actually going to happen, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So just call it being an all hazard prepared person. And you're going to be better off And there's no reason to fret and carry on about something that could happen that may never happen. But it's prudent to have things in place, batteries, or the flashlight and radio that you can wind to keep it going. I don't know exactly how that works, but it does.
Candles.
Okay. Okay. So, just think about what would be best for you and your family. Do you have a family plan? Everybody goes to work or goes out and about. Do you have a family plan of how to get together? And the last thing that I'd like to mention, which is hit upon pretty hard in the books, is a crisis will devastate the cellular and generally communication infrastructure. 9/11. I bet lots of people, not just in New York or DC, I bet lots of people couldn't get calls through.
No,
Well,
everything was saturated.
yeah,
Everyone was like, what the hell is going on, right?
there's
Yeah.
only so much bandwidth.
Yeah.
So here's a way to try and eke around the congestion, and it almost always works. Identify someone well out of your community, and I'm talking even out of state, that you can set up as the liaison. Uncle John in East Illinois,
Right.
that's our contact. And everybody, no matter where you are, you call Uncle John, and Uncle John will keep tabs of who has called in and where everyone expects to congregate, to gather.
Right. So you have a designated point person geographically situated far enough so they're outside the Black Swan zone.
Exactly.
And then hopefully they'll be able to liaison, keep everyone informed, and get you news back if it's even possible.
Yes.
That is a very useful and good idea. And how are you feeling about the books so far as an author, a published author, is now a marketer, communicator? Are you said you're having fun with it. How do you feel about it?
Well, I am very engaged, and
Great.
I hadn't
You're on the
expected it.
science fiction and fantasy factory. Here you are.
Yes. I mean, the opportunities have been wonderful. Meeting people like you.
Right.
When I'm at bookstores, people will come up to me and just chat. And I've become friends with who were perfect strangers just the day before that
Yeah.
particular book event. I mean, I'm a people person, and I just enjoy sharing company, sharing a discussion. That's something that appeals to me. And because I love books, it's a great conduit to do that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you seem again very informed, but most significantly, you're emotionally vested in the content, and that's what makes great writers and great writing, where you're not just getting your ideas onto the page, creating a world, characters overcoming obstacles, but you're pouring your heart and soul into something after enduring this collective Black Swan event that really motivated you to bring it to life through the channel of speculative fiction. And it's
Exactly.
very inspirational, and it's very honest. There's a feeling where, like when you were an MT, you're actually trying to help somebody. They're on the gurney, and now society, in a sense, is on the gurney because we're still trying to figure out what the hell happened, and then how can we mitigate this from happening again, and if it does happen, how we could be in a better position to deal with it and overcome it.
Exactly. Call it an after action report, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, in speculative fiction form. That
Uh-huh.
that's wonderful. Earlier in our conversation, you were hinting at your frustration in having this kind of experience and knowledge and seeing what was happening both on a micro level with your own life but also on a macro level in terms of government response, in terms of society's reaction to this. I know personally I found it very frustrating because we already had political polarization that was leading into this. And it was like a match thrown on that barrel of kerosene.
Mm-hmm.
Everything wrong in our society, or everything that was dysfunctional about it, got 10x'd with a Black Swan event. So from your vantage point, what were some of the core issues? And we can even start with the response. The idea of lockdowns was contentious. The vaccine protocols and the vaccine misinformation and information was problematic at best. We're still struggling with this idea of what scientific truth and evidence-based research is all about. And I think the general public is even more confused now that you've got RFK Jr. heading up, Make America Healthy Again, with very ambiguous, oftentimes contradictory messaging coming out. Where
Bingo.
Personally, I can understand the food pyramid being turned up and around. I get it. I think, putting Wonder Bread at the top is probably not the best idea. But at the same time, I don't know, measles outbreaks across the country, vaccines have been more beneficial as a category for humanity than anything next to clean water. I think, remember polio?
Oh, I got my polio shot.
I mean, come on. So,
yes.
I just want to give you the opportunity to share with us through the lens of your unique insight, both on the EMT level, the medical intelligence analyst level, and now as this storyteller. What did you see, and what can we learn from all that?
Well, it boils down to a couple of things. The top, perhaps, is communication. And when I say that, I mean that there was a problem, and there always is a problem. Don't get me wrong. There will always be a problem because you are working an incident in real time and things change on a dime. So I don't have a problem with things coming out initially that's not the right way, but you step back,
right? You just don't know.
You step back and you own up to whatever it was that you said and say, oh, this is not right. Here's the facts. That we need to do Y instead of X, and explain it. The public will be able to understand if it's written properly. And that was one of my pet peeves, was the lockdown. Absolutely agreed with it because we didn't know what was coming down the road. But as time went on, there seemed to be the capability to pivot to another phase. And that was at first slow to come. And then all of a sudden, boom, it was implemented and poorly. And it's across administrations. It's not one administration, it's across administration.
It was just endemic. I work professionally and have been for 20 years in healthcare communication. And it's taking complicated scientific stories and translating them into campaigns, into messaging where the public can understand what's going. They understand diseases, what causes them, what the symptoms are, what treatments are available. And I've learned that it's hard. It's hard to do it. But if you mess it up, then the entire chain is broken. And during the pandemic, I agree with you categorically that the communication was the number one issue. The public, most of the public, honestly, doesn't know the difference between a virus and a bacteria, for example.
Yeah.
The idea of a virus being airborne, what does that actually mean? So when people are, in a sense, mandated to wear masks when they enter a business, you can tell this don't tread on me kind of mentality might get in the way. But there was no real explanation. There was no real storytelling around what the hell is actually going on. And you had these pundits kind of talking and everyone freaking out, and people felt that their civil liberties were being violated on the one hand, and then they felt the government wasn't doing enough on the other. And meanwhile, the general public had honestly no idea as to what it even means for a pandemic to be taking place, what the data actually means. We tossed around 0.3, 0.5. What does any of that mean? And it was a terrible job of letting the public know and educate them about just
Exactly.
the basics of what's going on.
Which then leads to what you were just saying about the polarization being magnified. Politics really came in to muddy the waters, in my opinion, unnecessarily, but that's being naive, perhaps.
Yeah.
I, it just irked me so how the leadership couldn't and didn't lead as well as could have been, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And it doesn't take much to conclude that. And I want to reiterate your terrific point that is this is not about partisan politics.
Mm-mm.
It's not even about this debate between personal freedom and risk and convenience. I think it has to do with a fundamental incapacity or unwillingness to really inform the public in a reasonable and effective way on the one hand, and it's opportunism on the other, where people could feel people are afraid, and then they use that to their own selfish and nefarious ends to just rile people up, get them even more frightened, and get
Exactly.
folks to rally around your own team. And that is unfortunate. And I'm sure your years at the DHS, you guys didn't really anticipate that either, did you? I mean, on the one hand, you had, why would people not want to wear a mask during a pandemic, which is airborne?
Exactly.
And then in conjunction with that, could you have even have imagined throughout all the preparation that all of society would have a knee-jerk, reflexive, allergic reaction to basic scientific facts as fed by a political agenda? Who would have thought this, right?
And I think you have identified what really struck me the most and
Yeah.
caused me such angst. And even now I get that little stomach knot thing going on when I see, well, measles, I think we're going to lose our elimination status in a matter of days or weeks. And that to me is so unnecessary and disconcerting for our society, our collective society. So it baffles me. I just am perplexed, to say the least.
Yes, and now you were talking about hacking and the cyber. I think as an adjunct of that, we could add to the list artificial intelligence. And
Ooh,
and people are talking about, doomsday scenarios. There's that very popular book going around now, if anyone builds it, everyone dies, which is this idea that artificial general intelligence, when it's activated in whatever capacity, that it's got a mandate, more resources, more power, because I need to solve problems that you've given me. And since there's no real lived experience and awareness, and it's all this virtual kind of construct, well, if I need to make a lot of paper clips, then I might have to destroy all of humanity to do it. That's the thing. So there's the Black Swan AI looming, but also with this, and this is a point that I think dovetails into what we're talking about right now, add to this misinformation and miscommunication problem the already endemic and almost ubiquitous presence of artificial intelligence and fake content, AI slop. right? So on the one hand, it can make us smarter. It can aggregate all this medical information, do it in ways that are wonderful and productive for medical people, doctors, even EMTs. And on the other hand, it's just confusing people even more and make
I
them
think you're
even
right.
more skeptical about what truth is, what information is, and what science at its core is all about.
Yeah, and I was listening to a radio station the other day, and they made it a point to say, we are live DJs. This station will have humans always. And if you look over here, see it says human authored. My books are registered as being human authored.
I
So
needed to do that because I have
do
my
it.
sci-fi book,
Yeah,
and
do
then
it.
mine was I typed every letter, every word. I labored over this. You can tell, I think, if you just read it, that it's not bot made, but it's easy to just be dismissed as a prompt jockey. That's my favorite term right now
I love
for
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a hurdle, right? It's already so beneficial. I mean, machine learning does wonders for diagnostics, radiology. A bot does a better analysis of a scan than a human does these days. And
And
that's
it can be
meaningful.
used as a tool, but in my opinion, you need to have the human ability to add that je ne sais quoi, the emotion that maybe makes a difference.
And the bedside manner.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a guest, almost as a kind of satirical joke, I had my chat bot on. So it was an audio only podcast, but I literally had my chatty bro on the mic here. And we did an hour-long podcast where I just
No.
had him as a guest. And it's astonishing. There were a few moments where it got a little bit repetitive, and I asked it to change it up a little bit, stop being so obsequious to me. But the level of sophistication is astonishing, and even the creativity. And it remembered earlier parts of our conversation that it would reintroduce as we were talking, just like a real human. So we've
Wow.
gotten to the point where it's hard to tell, and who knows. And to your point, it's got tremendous utility to it, but it also has tremendous risk in all of these ways. So, it's important to keep the human element alive, right?
One would hope. I mean, inspiration. Can a, a computer, can something that's mechanical have inspiration? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and ism, and the one thing I really wonder about, I had another guest on, and he wrote a book all about artificial intelligence. Kind of the war happens between us, and they're banished from Earth, and then they return to reclaim the Earth. Bruno Rothgieser is the author, and as I was talking to him about it, this idea that can a machine be emotional, and is emotion a prerequisite for real sentience? Like, if you have a brain in a box that doesn't care and is lacking intentionality, is it real sentience? And I tend to think that part of what makes us human and what brings about what we would consider artificial general intelligence is this emergent quality that we do things for a reason. It's the heart first, and then the mind is, in a sense, an instrument of our passion. I'm creative, or I want to express myself, or there's something yummy, I need to kill it and eat it. we
And
we evolved, right, to survive and to procreate and to keep the species going. These are not rational goals. They're very emotional, instinctive. And our
exactly.
minds have evolved to enable us as tools to do these things. And I don't think you could separate the two.
I agree with you there. Also, for readers, we obviously are readers. We consume books, and what would be the draw if there weren't that emotion we want to identify with, we want to love, we want to hate to love the characters, we want to
Yes.
despise characters, we want to have that emotional connection. I don't know that there would be an emotional connection if it's machine made, if it's AI.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a great point. While you were writing Black Swan, how did you balance the world that you were creating with this need for character-driven storytelling? And especially within the genre of speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, uh, one problem I think that many writers have and that many readers endure is that a writer can get carried away with pageantry of their own imagination. And
Well,
as such, it interferes with exactly what you're saying is, which is the stakes get really low emotionally.
so yes, I have to say that I don't feel that these are plot driven. I feel that it's the classic love triangle type of in a situation that causes the characters to react and do things that they do because of their love or hate for one another, and how that factors in, and where they end up, how they cope. These are just human emotions, and that's what we look for. I truly believe is a connection.
Right. And the Black Swan event kind of gets in the way of that in a big way, right? So you're
Mm-hmm,
living your
mm-hmm,
life, you're connecting with people, everyone is disconnected due to this natural disaster. And just like in healthcare communications, we talked about the new normal and the renormalization. So you're living your life and then you get a disease or you get a problem. You're not like a usual consumer buying a product off a shelf. When you're looking at a treatment, you're looking for a way out. And when a Black Swan event happens, people are looking for a way out. So you're
mm-hmm,
creating this existential block to getting back to normalcy, and normalcy is connection, is love, is emotion.
mm-hmm.
So being focused on that makes for good writing.
I hope, yes, yes. And I love characters in the books that I tend to read. I get so attached to them that when I finish, I'm disappointed because I don't want that connection to end.
That's great. That's a good sign right there, right? So you
Yeah.
got the third one in the works. When is that anticipated for launch?
Ooh, I'd say a good year and a half away.
All right. So you're getting there. And then do you see yourself branching into other series or doing other stuff, or is this
I
your
don't. I see this as fulfilling that need that sprouted because of 2020
yeah.
situations. But I feel like we collectively have moved on, as so to speak. We have our new normal, so to speak. And so it's time, I think, once this third book comes out and I do the circuit type of thing, I believe it's time for me to branch out and focus on other opportunities.
That is awesome. I love that. I love that. It's not like an all or nothing thing, and you did your publishing kind of goal like on the bucket list, but also as a organic way of expressing some of your consternation, but also your hopefulness for the for the species. And
Yeah,
then and
so those first two books, they wrote themselves in no time. The first book I had completed in just weeks. It was 5 weeks.
just poured
Uh,
out, right?
it
Yeah,
just poured out. Of course, it needed to be edited,
yeah.
but the second book, equally as easy, it just flowed. The third book, I can tell that this the driver, the fire inside me that consumed me to be able to look for that cathartic moment has passed maybe. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to realize something that came so organically again. And I think that's why I think it's going to be a while before it comes out, because I will write and then I'll say, this is pretty good. And maybe another day I'll write and I'll say, this has lost that spark. And so I'll just trash that and rewrite. So, it's a different feeling, and one that I really would like to try to fix. And I think I'm well on my way. But it did not come out as easily as the others.
That's a very honest, transparent expose of your journey. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter's mastermind. The first book came out as you described. She had a really tough time with the second one, and she felt she just regurgitated the first. And then the third one, she started branching out and got her wings. To me, in the series, I read all the books because I got them from my kids, and of course,
Sure.
they didn't read them, so I ended up reading them all. The fourth one, The Goblet of Fire, to me, that's my favorite because the whole world comes together. But she had a very similar arc as you're describing, which is like all the energy was there, and then she was kind of like, now what? And she persisted, if only because she had this vision of 7 books. 7 is the magic number, and she wanted to follow them as they grew up. And again, to your point, she loved the characters, and she wanted to see them grow up. And that kept her motivated. So whether you're famous or not, or whether you sell 10 million copies or 10, the trials and tribulations of a writer are pretty much always the same. Every day you wake up and either you got the mojo or you don't. And it could change over time. There's this oscillating journey of spontaneous energy and enthusiastic creation. And other days it might turn into a real grind where you look at it and go like, ew.
I know.
So
but yes, I want to. I have intended to, and I think I'm pretty much there. I wanted to wrap things up with the characters.
Yeah, that's a strong motivation. I have my own sci-fi series, and I see the whole thing. I actually see the final scene in the series, and I know I just got it. I just love that final scene so much. I just have to get us there. So that's even my biggest internal motivation, based again on the characters.
Yeah,
and their zaniness. I wanna get not even so much my readers, but I want to get myself there.
Yeah, but if you get there, then your readers will want to get there too.
Exactly. It does start here, right? And it doesn't start on, I'm going to write a book so people will love it and I can be famous. No, I want to write a book because I have these strong feelings and I need to get it out there. And that's my priority. And if you love it, then other people very well might love it too.
Right.
So there you have it. And then lastly, you've gotten some, I see you're internationally acclaimed. Tell us a little bit about the feedback so far on the 2 books that are out there.
Well, I am proud to say that the International Impact Book Awards has given the 2024 mystery thriller category to my first book, Black Swan Impact. And then the next year, 2025, gave the same award to Black Swan Shock. So they seem, the people that do the judging seem to think it's pretty okay.
Well,
and then
that's good, right?
Yeah.
Get a little Attention. I saw on Instagram that you're accepting the award, right? You got that's cool.
And then in this past July, in July 2025, Publishers Weekly recognized Black Swan Shock as a thriller pick. Great. So that was a nice gesture. And then, although I really have very few reviews online, they're pretty darn good. So I'd love to see people's reaction, of course. or feedback. Love to see that. So, I can only get better with feedback. And so that's why I do a lot of book clubs. Sometimes they are so informative and affirming, and sometimes they're something that I have to step back and evaluate. And I like that. I want to know how people think and feel when they read my book.
Yeah, that's terrific. It's not like the tree falling in a forest, but you're out there to connect. I've had guests who are on both sides of the spectrum. So some guests are very much into and almost obsessed with getting that feedback. Many writers actually do beta readings. So before they even publish, they'll pass around the manuscript, usually in PDF form. Then they'll take in feedback and incorporate some of it. Some do it dynamically even after they publish. And other folks are just like, I don't care what people think. Rick Rubin, the producer, has been going around and he says that the audience must come last. Just be true to yourself. And I like that idea. And maybe I'm a practitioner more of this I just do my own thing category. But I think you make a great point, which is ultimately as writers, we're communicators. And we have a lot that we want to share, and we're sharing it. So it should be a connection with other people who can read it and get something out of it.
Well, one thing that I did do, and you can call it beta reading, I have reached out to people from my professional past who would be good critiquers because of their expertise.
Yes, I was going to ask you, but you led the witness here in reverse. That's where I was heading, which is professional appraisal, because presumably there's procedural stuff, there's using your medical intelligence analytics, right? Is this feasible? Is it viable? Is it accurate?
And yes, so and I'm very lucky to have these connections. Some of them are, people that I worked with on a professional level that then turned into friends, but friends who would be honest. So, I had the likes of the doctor who was the physician for a president. And I will not go into who or whatever, but he was also a doctor for the emergency response biological threats. And then I had someone from FEMA, not FEMA, Coast Guard, who was responsible for emergency response in many things, including Katrina. There's the gamut, and they all seem to make sense why I chose them. I had someone who was a political advisor during the Cold War. So you get that aspect of it. It's kind of the gamut. The first responder who is known at least in the first responder community. So I really feel that they would offer me both an honest critique and perhaps a direction that I might want to take or to remove. And so it was a good way to ensure that what is out there is truly credible and thrilling at the same time. Kirkus Reviews said that it's an intense futuristic thriller that recalls the best of 1970s disaster cinema. And, I was one of those kids that I
remember
loved.
we were talking earlier, and the Towering Inferno.
Yes.
Remember the Poseidon Adventure,
Earthquake.
Yeah, those were staples of remember the Saturday night movie? They would chop it up with 20-minute intervals and then commercial breaks, and they would remove the risque scenes and any naughty words.
Well, it was the show Emergency that really
I remember that. Adam 12.
Yes.
Yeah, they had these series of shows with emergency responders, with cops, with all that, like real world crisis management, on the boob tube every week.
Yeah.
That's how we grew up. So
Uh-huh.
when you saw that review, it must have been kind of heartening that you were tapping into your roots as now you're an entertainer, but before you were entertained by all this stuff.
Exactly.
And so you're a good storyteller too, which is part of it. And you had this authoritative confirmation that the science was accurate, that they were creating a world that had validity to it, internal consistency, and most significantly, any of the recommendations that would naturally come out of that would be sound, which is, if you know your science, then if there's any kind of cautionary tale that you're providing, that it too has validity, because otherwise you undercut yourself. Many science fiction writers in particular, they just pull stuff out of their butt. It's like, and then after a while, it's like there's no grounding in science. There's no credibility. It's just whatever. And then it's just silly. And then you lose that credibility.
Yeah.
Andy Weir comes to mind a little bit. He's the author of The Martian.
Mm-hmm.
And he started as a blog, and then he built up a following organically with people just like whom you mentioned, experts like engineers, physicists, cosmologists, mineralogists. And they would read his stuff, and the word got out in these professional circles. And they would share their expertise, which is like, no. It's not 50 cc's of water at 75, or he would need more pure oxygen in order to do X, or that combustion that you describe needs this or that. So it falls into the area of hard science fiction. It's like very detail and process oriented. His new movie, Hail Mary,
Yes.
is similar to that. I'm excited about it. I think that both the book I read and loved and the movie adaptation was the best thing Ridley Scott has done in decades.
It's out? I didn't know it was out.
The Martian is out.
The Martian is out, and I've seen that. Love the book and The Martian. But
yeah, Hail Mary is coming out, I think, in March.
Okay. So, yeah, I want to see that.
It's an alien, it's a little spidery alien, so that should be fun. But again, it's beta testing with experts, and that's intriguing. It's kind of fun. My science fiction book has wild ideas in it too, and I used my chatty bro to help me a little bit with the research. So I didn't really have expert feedback, but I had the bot researching. So I didn't write my book, but it helped research it. And
well, that's a tool.
It's a tool. I called BS on my BS.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So thank you so much for making time on the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah. And I really enjoyed hearing about your background, which then played into this discussion.
Yeah. Again, healthcare marketing, healthcare communications. I was a medical writer, editor, which kind of led me almost by accident into this agency career of working for life science companies to translate complicated things into simpler messages. So I have particular sensitivity to everything that you've been hinting at in terms of some of the systemic problems of the pandemic. And it heightened my sensitivities, I think, to your approach, where this cautionary tale is eminently worth getting into and reading, because these problems are real. And it's kind of the perfect storm where everything goes wrong. It's not only the grid goes down, but our politics, our culture, our sense of self all go out the window. And knowing what to expect is taking you most of the way there, in terms of, you can't really prevent a Black Swan event, but you could prepare yourself. And then when it does hit, you could be in much better shape to deal with it. And if it comes down to survivability, probably a good idea to be aware of these things.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
Helen Vettori, author of the Black Swan series. I'll put your bio and info in the description of the podcast, along with a link to your website and to get your book.
Super. Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us. Take care. Best wishes on your third book, too. When your third book launches, let's get back in touch and we can do another session to give people a heads up about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.